Hello, my name is David Roach, and I am an Awana field missionary, and I'm located in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So if we haven't met before, hello. What I'm trying to do here in this breakout is kind of condense two amazing sessions that Josh Denhart did for our virtual Awana Ministry Conference last year. So he did a session on retaining volunteers and a session on recruiting volunteers. So I'm going to kind of condense that and just break it down into some, quick bullet points for us. But if you want to see the full breakout, I have the link up here, awanaministry.conference.com/videos. Go there and you'll scroll through. There's a lot of different videos there, but you'll find both of these videos by Josh Denhart. Each of them is like a 35, 40-minute watch. So I'm trying to condense that down. And Josh already talks really fast. So some of you might think that I talk fast. So I'm just going to try and breeze through and make this something that we can all kind of learn from and get some encouragement on this important area of retaining and recruiting volunteers. So Josh is intentional at starting off with the retaining of volunteers. The easiest volunteers to serve alongside are those that are already in the ministry. And so how can we be retaining these volunteers? So we have these 10 buckets that we're going to be pouring into as far as retaining these volunteers. So the more we can pour into each of these buckets, the more likely a volunteer is going to stay in their role long-term. So the first bucket, compensation. Wait a second. Thought this was a church ministry video, right? Yeah, for the most of our volunteers, this is definitely not going to be a bucket that we pour a whole lot into, but Josh gives the example of a stipend where he was able to find a way in his operational budget to give to a high capacity volunteer, someone who is really essential to the ministry, someone who is knocking it out of the park. And he found $25 a month that he could give to this high capacity volunteer as a stipend. And so that was a way of recognizing what this woman was able to do for the ministry. And also it gave him some flexibility to ask a little bit more of her. There's some people in our ministry, right, that we just know that we can't ask anything else of them. But he was able to give her the stipend. And then eventually she was able to move from a stipend to a part-time employee with the church, eventually even becoming a full-time employee overseeing their entire special needs ministry. So it's an option. Maybe it's not something that you've thought of in your ministry before, but compensation is one area that we can be pouring in potentially to retain volunteers. The next one is a sense of purpose. And for us in church ministry, right, we have this one easy. We have the gospel. We have child discipleship. So do they have that same sense of purpose? That's a bucket that we can be pouring into in order to retain a volunteer. The next one, relationships at work. Do our volunteers enjoy being together? Is there community there? Do they have friends that they're serving alongside? If you don't already, maybe there's a way that you can have set aside time outside of ministry time for get-togethers, things that they can just hang out and get to know each other and enjoy that time together. So having relationships at work is a way that we can be retaining volunteers. You probably do something as far as appreciation. We do that lots of different ways with cards, with gift cards, maybe upfront appreciation. But the key here is appreciate each volunteer in a way that matters to them. Different people like to be appreciated differently. You probably know some people that if you get them up on stage to appreciate them, they're just going to kind of, cower down and like, that's just not going to meet their need. That's not how they want to be appreciated. So figure out the ways to appreciate each person in a way that's going to matter to them. Maybe it's even just something small where you know that they have a favorite candy bar and you just pick it up at the register on your way out and just say, hey, I saw this and thought of you. Maybe that's just a really simple way to show appreciation. But that's a bucket that we definitely want to be pouring into to retain our volunteers. The next one is a metric of success. Do your volunteers know at the end of ministry, at the end of an Awana club night, that their night was successful? So maybe it's just having some short descriptions, some short bullet points. Hey, did you have a gospel conversation with a child tonight? Or Did you listen to at least one Bible verse? Even if you're the game guy, you can listen to a Bible verse for a kid as they're coming into games. Did you smile with an adult or share a story with an adult at the end of the club night about a time that you had with their child? So just something, you have some short bullet points like that where a leader could say at the end of the night, you know what, amid all the craziness, I know that my night was successful because I listened to a Bible verse or I shared the gospel. So have some short, little easy metric of successes, not long job descriptions. Nobody reads through those anyway. But what's a way that your leaders can leave the night knowing that they had a successful time with the kids? Another bucket is workload. And then we immediately jump to the burnout side of this, right? We're so nervous about burning people out. And maybe for some of your volunteers, that is, something that you need to think about, but don't go on the other side either. Because the opposite of burnout is just sheer boredom. And if we bore our volunteers, they're not going to stay with us either. So analyze each volunteer specifically and find that balance in there, because you don't want burnout, but man, there's also that real, trap of potentially giving somebody not enough stuff to do. So if they're bored, they're not going to be a long-term volunteer in our ministry either. So think of that both ways. The next bucket is ownership and influence. Ownership and influence. Now, I know if you're like me and you're overseeing a ministry, there's some responsibility there. There's some control that you like to have. And I'm not saying here to get rid of your control. I'm more saying, what are ways that you can get more people into the discussion? What are some ways that you can have more people with some skin in the game? So in the end, there's still going to be, decisions that are made in leadership, but the more people that have a say in the ministry, that helps them really have that investment in it, and they're more likely to stay long-term. So ownership and influence is a bucket that we can help to pour into. The next bucket is giftedness. You may have the most dedicated, they have that sense of purpose. They have relationships that they're at church, but man, they're just misplaced. Maybe they're more of a 3rd through 5th grade person, and you have them, watching the bathroom with the cubbies or the preschool group. So just analyze the giftedness of your volunteers and make sure that it's a good fit. Sometimes people kind of feel pigeonholed in a role because that's where they started serving or that's where you needed them, and so they did that, but that's not really an area of gifting for them. So really try and fit the gifting of each volunteer to the role that suits them the best. The next one, philosophical agreement. So we talked about sense of purpose, and philosophical agreement is similar to that. It's how you reach that purpose, right? So you may have different paths that you can take. And so are they in agreement with you? Do they understand the path that you're on in the ministry and why you're making the choices that you're making? Are they in philosophical agreement with you? And maybe that's just clarifying some decisions that have made and having some good communication skills. So that's a bucket. And then the last one here is, are you yourself an engaged leader? Do you know your volunteers? Are you in there? Are you leading from afar? Or are you invested in the work with them? And when you're invested in the work, when you're that engaged leader, you see the struggles that they're facing. You see the challenges, and maybe ways that you can provide some training, provide some encouragement, resources to help meet the needs of the volunteers. So those are the 10 buckets for retaining volunteers. The volunteers that we can retain are volunteers that we don't have to go and be recruiting, right? So those are 10 buckets to retain the volunteers. So now let's talk about recruiting. So the good news here is we're talking about doing less and doing it better. There's a lot of things that we do in recruiting that just aren't that helpful. So what are some things to stop doing, and what are some things to start doing? First of all, stop having the senior pastor just make pleas from the pulpit. Now, we're not saying that he can't talk about the ministry, can't promote what you're doing in children's ministry in Awana. That's all great, but we don't want to have the pastor pleading from the pulpit, asking everyone to check a box to sign up in children's ministry. You may get some check boxes, but you're not getting dedicated, committed volunteers from that. Stop expecting a cute video to solve all your problems. We love videos of the kids, and that can be a tool in recruiting volunteers, but it's going to take more than just a cute video to get people really committed to your ministry. Stop doing drive-by recruiting. What I mean by that is if you're going down the hallway at church and you see people turn the opposite direction because they see you coming, you've done a lot of drive-by recruiting. You're just, bumping elbows in the hallway and just, trying to get anyone with a pulse pretty much to help you out in ministry. That's not the way we're going to go about doing this. That's not going to get the best volunteers. Also, don't resort to a lot of bulk emails. Those are very easily discarded and just dismissed. Bulk emails is not going to be the way to go. And then, of course, not begging. This is not just us on our hands and knees saying, we just need you. We just need you. So those are some things that maybe we've done before. And hey, I'm in there with you. I've done those things. But there's better ways to go about recruiting our volunteer team. What are the things to start doing? And so I wanted to start off by looking at this passage in 1 Thessalonians. And I love just having this, somewhere up in the children's wing of the church, impressed on our hearts. This 1 Thessalonians 2:7-8, which says, "But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us." So what we're thinking about here is we're thinking about relationships. I mean, being affectionately desirous of the kids that we're serving, but also the leaders that we're serving alongside. We're going to share the gospel, but we're also going to give up of ourselves, right? There's going to be some sacrifices that it takes to be a part of this team. So we're thinking about relationships. We're thinking about asking people face to face as a person, understanding that they have, that there's going to be some sacrifices, but there's also going to be a lot of joys. We're inviting them in to have an opportunity to be a part of this ministry. So we want to have a priority on those relationships. We also want to share the heartbeat, share what gets us excited. Why do you invest the time that you invest? How does it help your faith? How do you grow personally as you serve? I mean, how many times at the end of a ministry year do you have that volunteer who stands up on stage and says, you know what, at the start of the year, I wasn't really sure about serving in Awana. I wasn't really sure about serving in children's ministry. But man, I've grown so much from my time with the kids. We hear those stories. We know that that's going to be true. And so let's invite people in. This is not just an opportunity for them to give to the kids, but this is an opportunity for them to grow, to be matured in their own walk with God, to be blessed as they see the Holy Spirit working in others, as they see little aha moments with the kids that they're with in Awana in children's ministry. So thinking about not just getting a volunteer, we're looking at making disciples. And we want to invite them into the ministry to have an opportunity to grow, opportunity to share their gifts and to be blessed in addition to being a blessing. So we're not just filling up spots. I know recruiting volunteers often feels like a list. We have each of our age groups and we have empty lines that we need to fill. But please don't think of it like that. We want to think about it as having volunteers who are part of our team and serving alongside us. All right, so moving on, we had the retention framework earlier. Now we have the volunteer recruiting framework. So these, again, are 10 ways that we can be recruiting up our team. So the first one here is, who's your top 10? If you could have anyone in the church who's to participate in ministry, who's your dream team? Put those at the top of your list, whether they're serving with your ministry right now or not. Put together that list of top 10 and then ask them. Secondly, know your people. Start stalking them. That's not a typo. I mean, get on Facebook, get on social media, see what they're sharing, see what God's doing in them, see how that can help you personalize the ask that you're going to make for them to be part of serving in your team. So the next one is circle of influence. What I mean by that is start with the people in your closest circle of influence. They're the ones who are the easiest to talk to. They're the low-hanging fruit. As you go about your volunteer recruitment, it's going to feel a little clunky at first. So you want to work out your kinks with the people that you're most comfortable with, and then you can branch out from there. The next way of recruiting these volunteers is don't say no for them. Part of that dream team that I was mentioning earlier is don't just assume someone's going to say no. Make the ask, let the Holy Spirit do the work. You might be surprised at some of the people that actually do say yes and step in some capacity. The next one is memorize, normalize, and personalize. So know your stuff, know what it is that you're asking them. Personalize the ask. What is the role that you envision that specific person filling? How are they fitting in that role? Why is that something that you think they'd be good at? So know what it is that you're asking them to do. And we say memorize it just so it comes off your tongue really easily. You don't want to be robotic, but the more that you just know, your mission statement, what it is that you're trying to do with these kids, that's just going to come out more naturally as you get more practice with it. So memorize and personalize. The next one, tap on the shoulder. That just means, hey, get face to face. Tap on a shoulder, have a conversation. Maybe you start off with a phone call or text message or email or something like that. But at some point, get eye to eye with somebody and have that discussion. There's a lot more clear conversation that happens face to face. The next one here, connect as a shepherd. Asking that simple question, what's God doing in your life? Maybe you may start off a conversation looking to recruit a potential volunteer, but as you have that conversation, you realize, there's some really good reasons why that volunteer is just not going to be able to serve right now. There's maybe, personal things going on, health things going on. So be ready to take that role of a shepherd and understand that you may have a passionate volunteer that has to take time away, and that's okay for the time being. The next one, be excited. I hope that that's not something we really have to, talk a whole lot about. This is children's ministry, and so I hope that you're excited. If you're not, you're going to be, you're going to see these kids, and excitement is just going to be overflowing onto you probably. So, but be excited. People like to be part of something that's exciting. So in our asking, have that smile, right? Be excited. Remind them that this is disciple making. This is eternity altering ministry. And that can be an exciting thing that they can be a part of. Opportunity versus loss. This is just having that upfront conversation that just says, hey, being a part of this children's ministry, you're going to miss out on some adult Bible study time, or you might have to miss part of the Sunday morning service. So just acknowledging that up front, but then highlighting, but here's the opportunity that we're going to have with these kids. And here's a kid that you're going to be working with, and share that story of a kid that's really going to be impacted by their service in the ministry. So acknowledge the sacrifices that they're going to have to make, but highlight the opportunities and the joys that are going to await them as they join your team. And then reminding again, recruiting is discipleship. Remember, these are people. This is a relationship. We're not just trying to check a box or fill in a line on our volunteer recruitment card. This is about relationships, and this is about inviting people in to what God is doing. God is doing amazing things in the children's ministry of your church, and this is inviting them to be a part of that blessing, to use their gifts to be a part of what God's going to do through those children, those youth. So just some quick summaries here. You can go ahead and pause the video here if you just wanted to have a chance just to pray over this and think about what this means for you and your church ministry. But just remember the buckets that need to be filled for these volunteers that you already have. Think about those buckets. What buckets maybe can you do a better job of pouring into? And it might be different for different volunteers. Different volunteers may have different needs there. So, and then in the recruitment strategies, what things can be started, what things can be stopped. Remember, recruitment doesn't have to do more. Do less, do it better. And remember, this is about inviting people into your ministry. This is about relationships, both between us and the kids, but also us and the team that we're serving alongside. So I hope this helps encourage you as you recruit and retain volunteers. Thank you for your ministry. And I know that God's going to use you in awesome ways in your church. God bless.